Good morning, Abundant Life. This is Pastor Chris, and today we're going to be looking at Romans chapter 9, starting in verse 30 and then going through chapter 10, verse 4. A few months ago, we had the presidential election. That'll come up in about 3.5 more years. Those are always very time consuming and they're expensive campaigns. And here's the thing, everybody who runs for president in any given election year, there's going to be a lot on both sides. Everybody except one loses. So all that money, all that time was for nothing. Everybody except one guy loses. And that's why Gerald Ford's presidency was so unique. He never ran. He never campaigned for the presidency. Well, he ran for re-election and lost, but when he became president, he had never been on the ticket, was never nominated, nobody ever voted for him. If you recall, what happened is the vice president at the time, Spiro Agnew, resigned due to a scandal. Nixon named Ford the vice president, and then when Nixon resigned, makes me wonder what all the guys ahead of him who had run for the presidency in the past and lost must have thought. How do guys like Barry Goldwater, George McGovern, Hubert Humphrey, Adlai Stevens, how do they all feel about this? Gerald Ford didn't even want to be president. He wanted to be the Speaker of the House. And he just kind of stumbles into the presidency. All right, now why do I bring this up? Well, Paul has argued that everybody, even Gentiles who were not the chosen people in the Old Testament, everybody could come to God now. But this does bring up another issue. According to Paul, the Jews, the chosen people who had spent their lives actively seeking God, these are the Adlai Stevensons, these were the Hubert Humphreys who wanted to find God. At the end, they wind up on the outside looking in, and the Gentiles who never even tried to seek God wind up with them. That doesn't seem fair. And even if that's the way the system works, and it is fair, how do we explain why this is fair and how it works? Well, that's what we'll look at today. And again, let me, while my phone turns on again, stupid phone, let me have you look at starting in verse 30 of Romans chapter 9. What shall we say then? That the Gentiles who did not pursue righteousness have obtained it, a righteousness that is by faith, but the people of Israel who pursued the laws, a way of righteousness, have not attained their goal? Now, any Jew who had a problem with this system actually had a good point. You know, we spent our whole lives keeping the law, keeping the covenants. We were the ones who were seeking God, and the pagan Gentiles who hadn't even tried to seek God are in and we're out. This should have been no contest. How could it possibly end up that the Gentiles got what the Jews had been seeking when they weren't even trying to get in? Well, let's keep looking here because it's not quite that simple. And again, my phone turned off. Verses 32 and 33. Well, let me start again at verse 31. The people of Israel who sought the way of righteousness have not attained their goal. Why not? Because they pursued it not by faith, as if it were by works. They stumbled over the stumbling stone. As it is written, see, I lay in Zion a stone that causes people to stumble, and a rock that makes them fall. And the one who believes in him will never be put to shame. You see, it isn't quite this simple. Let's not forget about the whole question of Jesus. The Jews didn't accept God's Son. To him, he was a stumbling block. He's what tripped them up. But still, look at it from their point of view. Everything was working just fine before Jesus came along. They had the covenant with God already. They didn't need anyone showing up and changing things. Jesus was a stumbling point for them. So why is it that Jesus caused the Jews to stumble? If they'd been doing just fine before Jesus, then didn't they have a point? God, why send them? The old system was working. and you mess that up. And if you say, well, it wasn't really working, well, okay, we liked it. It was good. Why change it? I remember when I was a kid growing up, we had this in the days before cable television. We just had the old rabbit ear antennas that sat on top of the TV, and we try to get it as good as we could. You spend your time adjusting it, what have you. It's that's as good as it'll get. So fine. So we're watching real staticky TV, and inevitably, mom would come in and she'd say, "Oh, that picture's terrible. Let me fix that." And say, "Please, mom, please, just leave it alone, please." And she would fix it. She would adjust the rabbit ears some more. And of course, she made it worse. And she would say, "Well, if that's the best I can do," and walk out. It's like, "Mom, please, we know it's broken. Please don't fix it. Please just leave it alone." I wonder if that's how the Jews felt about Jesus. Lord, why send him if it's going to wind up with us on the outside? Okay, now you're thinking it doesn't work this way. Come on. Yes, we know it doesn't work that way. And we know that Jesus didn't make things worse. But still, isn't it ironic that the Jews who were trying to get to God end up getting left out, and Gentiles who never tried at all end up getting in? All right, even if that isn't unfair, it still has the appearance of being unfair. And we know that this system does indeed work. It's a perfect system. It's one God set up. But what we still need is an explanation. How do we explain why people, excuse me, who are seeking the things of God are now on the outside looking in because of some theological disagreement? Well, what's the answer to that? Tune in next time and we'll talk about it. Till then, have a great day.